Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? So, my name is Alan, and I'm going to be your teacher this week. Which this is going to this is going to be such an odd and different week because we're all going to be doing this just like on the screen. We really were trying to find a way for me to come out there. I wanted so badly to come and teach out there in Bocas. I mean, I love it out there. I was really excited. I've only been out there a few times, and it just didn't work out. And I'll explain why in just a minute, but. Yeah, I hope you guys are all ready. This is going to be very different. I'm used to teaching in front of, a group of students, and I'm actually like pre-recording this just because where I live, I don't really have very good internet service, and so I can't even really live stream it very well. And so we just decided, I've done a couple of webinars for our ministry, which I'll get into in just a minute, and so we just decided, you know what, let's just try it and see how it goes. So thanks for inviting me and allowing me to teach. I'm really excited. This is a subject that I teach a lot, and it's kind of funny because this is teaching on frontier missions has kind of become the staple teaching that I do in YWAM. And it's funny because I do this teaching in YWAM and outside of YWAM. I've done it for OM and churches, and especially now in the ministry that I lead. I teach on missions all over the place and all kinds of other topics as well, but I'm really excited because I haven't, since I've kind of been on the road for a while now, I haven't been able to do just like a full week on teaching on frontier missions. I usually do like a day or two, like a little seminar or something like that. And so this is really exciting. It's great for me. And so I'm gonna adjust, since I'm doing this online, everything's backwards for me. There we go. Because I know some people are gonna be like, oh, they're gonna get really distracted by by the collar. So as you can see, it is quite cold here. That's why I'm wearing this jacket right now, this hoodie right now. It's quite cold. I know where you guys are. It is beautiful and warm, and you guys can go swimming right now, right after this class, or fishing or whatever you guys do, scubaing or something like that. But here it is really cold. It's like 40 degrees out there right now, and so we're in Texas, and it's freezing. So of course it's wintertime. So okay, let's get into this. Now I am going to I'm used to a lot of questions and answers at time during this class because inevitably questions will come up. So we will make a time for there to be questions and answers. I might be able to find a place where I can kind of do some live streaming. We can do some live questions and answers, or we'll let your leaders, like Katie, decide exactly how we're going to do that. But in the meantime, I'm just going to do this teaching. Now, I want to lay a little bit of ground rules before we get into this, just kind of give you an idea for what's about to happen. I use a lot of slides, and I use a lot of video. And so obviously, I am not super technical guy, so there's probably someone in that class who's going to be like, oh no, I could have set this all up, and this is going to drive you crazy. But I have to do this the old man way and the old school way, and this is the only way I know how to do it. So the way we're going to do this, I have this screen that you're seeing right now in front of you, and I have my slides, so I'm going to minimize the screen like this, and I'll have these kind of slides, okay? Now, whenever I have videos and stuff, my slides are going to go full screen. So you're going to see me messing around with the computer quite a bit, flipping it out. So like, I'll pull this up. I think you can see my whole screen. So I'll pull this up, as you can see, and the slides will come up. All right, now this is going to happen all throughout this whole class. So just get yourself ready for it, because without my slides, this class, as you will see very quickly, this class kind of would go downhill pretty quickly. So I also want to be sensitive to your time, because I know that you guys, I know with breaks and all that kind of stuff, so I want to make sure, check my time. So get comfortable, guys. Please don't fall asleep on me. I know how tempting it will be because this is not, you don't have a live teacher in front of you, but please don't fall asleep because there is a lot of good stuff here. We're going to be, every single day is going to be something completely different. That's what I love about Frontier Missions. That's what I love about this class. This class isn't just, okay, we're going to just talk about statistics. It isn't, we're just going to talk about, people groups. It isn't just talking about missionaries. Every single day is going to be very different kind of topic. Today, this class is our foundational class, right? This is we're going to set everything up. We're going to get everything prepared, and we're going to move forward into missions and the history of missions and frontier missions today, and then unreached people groups and all the statistics and everything that goes along with it. So this is going to be a really, really awesome class. I love teaching this. And this class does not come from I didn't just sit down and read all of these things. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Actually, let me pray before I do this, and then I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself, about my family, where I come from, and then we'll go from there and move forward in this class. So, Lord Jesus, I just want to come before you, and I just ask you, Lord, that you would just bless this time, that you would bless these students, Lord, and that you would just, Holy Spirit, that you would speak through me, that you would give me your words, and that the topics that we go into, the subjects that we go into, Lord, that these would be what would be on your heart right now for this moment, for these students, Lord, that you would, if there's any bunny trails I need to go on, that you would take me on those bunny trails, but they wouldn't be just worthless bunny trails, Lord, but that they would be for you. So, Lord, I just ask you to bless these students in Jesus' mighty name. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Lord. We honor you, and you're so awesome. So, okay, let me minimize this real quick. So let's get into this, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself first. So I'm going to minimize this here. So this is my wonderful family, and they're all awesome people. And so you can see my oldest son. This picture is actually about a year or two old now, but the guy with the Angry Birds shirt, that's my son Elias, and then the other guy, the little boy up there, that's Lucas, and my wife Carmi. That picture there, some of you may recognize, that is from the YWAM Cheatey Key base. So I started out, I grew up in the church here in Texas. I was born and raised here, and I actually always wanted to be a missionary. My grandmother was a missionary to Africa. I actually found out later that I have a long line of missionaries and ministers in my family. One of our family members in, I think it's Scotland, they actually have like a statue of the guy because of the mission work that he did, all this crazy stuff. And so it's just always been part of my passion, part of my vision. I want to win the world for Jesus. And so I started out just here in Texas. I'm from a very small little town called Colioke. I think there's less than 1,000 people in this town. At least there was when I was growing up. And as I was growing up here, I grew up hearing my grandmother's stories. I was homeschooled my whole life. And whenever I was being homeschooled, my mother, she knew that I was going to be called into missions. The Lord spoke to her about my calling in ministry. I had been saying it since I was little, that I was going to be a missionary. And so she actually kind of trained me in missions. I mean, I went through all the normal schooling stuff, all the normal things that you learn. But on the side of that, my mother also, she would have me read a lot of missionary books, and I'd watch these old missionary videos and movies and all these kinds of things, kind of getting myself. She was kind of training me, preparing me the best way that she knew how for the ministry that God had called me to be in. So I grew up like these topics that I was saying earlier. This isn't just coming out of me just reading books. This is coming out of just experience, right? So there's a lot of statistics, a lot of things, but a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about, some of them are history, which obviously happened a long time ago. That comes from book study. But a lot of other things, they come from direct just experience, things that I have seen, things that, like the cultural things we're going to talk about, moving in cultures and adapting to cultures. All of those things come out of experience, and just also interviews with other missionaries and people that I know, because I've grown up with this, right? I've grown up in the missions mindset, and that's just what I've always done. I mean, being in ministry, I can honestly tell you guys, I've never had a 9-to-5 job ever. I have been in ministry from the time I moved out, which I'm going to go into that story for you guys just a little bit. And it's just to say, all of this is just to say that the things that we're going to be talking about, these are things that come from my heart and come from my life, right? These next 5 days of class, this isn't just theory for me. This is my life. This is my life story. These are all things that have come from just, I could honestly do classes for several. I mean, I could do probably a whole school just on missions. And what I've done is I've boiled it all down, all of just my life and what I've seen and what I've studied and what I've learned over the years. I've boiled it down into this 5-day class, these 5-day classes that is just like the essence. It's the best of the best. And that's why I really believe in this class. I really believe in what you guys are going to get out of it. So I grew up in that mentality. Whenever I was 13 years old, I wanted to be a missionary, but I had no idea how to actually become a missionary. My grandmother was a missionary, but it was some small organization in Africa that I didn't even know any missionaries other than my grandmother. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. Jim Elliot's journal was a huge thing for me. I read his journal, Fox's Book of Martyrs. I mean, all these different books about people who gave everything for the Lord, and that was what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. So whenever I was 13 years old, a YWAM team came to my church, and this is why I'm not sure where you guys are in your classes, but this is why outreach is so important. And I love it whenever I'm put to teach. They ask me to teach near the end of the lecture phase, because a lot of people in their DTSs, they don't understand the impact that their outreach can have. They think that outreach, there's a tendency, because you guys are new in this and you're students, there's a tendency to have a focus on yourself, on how awesome it's going to be for you, which it will be, which is great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's wonderful. God is going to use you. He's going to change you. He's going to speak to you on your outreach. But there are going to be a lot of times when you're going to be tired and you're not going to feel like doing things. You're not going to feel like going to a church and doing dramas again, or whatever your team is prepared to do. You're not going to feel like going in and translating or doing another children's program or whatever it is that you guys are going to do. But I want you to understand the incredible impact that these ministries can have, and you don't even know who you're going to touch. Because there was a YWAM team that came into my church just here in Colioque, Texas. It was a team from Tyler, Texas base. They came into the church and they just did the normal DTS outreach stuff. It wasn't anything special. They did, your classic dramas, masks and just the stuff that, they're just the old dramas. I don't know if you guys are doing it, but masks and hearts and all the normal dramas that people do. And there was one point where, probably the most coolest thing that I had seen at that point in any dramas, because I was part of a drama team in my church. It was one guy, there was this scene where they're fighting the devil. It was Jesus was fighting the devil and somehow he did a flip. And I was like, whoa, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's not what you'd expect from missionaries, because I just knew my grandmother. I couldn't imagine my grandmother doing a backflip off the stage and, kneeing Satan in the face, because she's my grandmother and she's an old school Methodist missionary, the full dress with the neck thing up to here and all that, that was my grandmother. And so whenever I saw a young guy with tattoos doing a backflip off the stage and, throat punching Satan, I was just like, these are the coolest missionaries I've ever even heard of. I'm thinking of Jim Elliot out in the jungle, agonizing in his sicknesses as he's writing in his little journal, all of his suffering. And so it just completely took me by surprise. But I still, whenever that happened, I had no grid in my mind for I could do this. I could actually go and preach the gospel with people like this. These are missionaries. But my mother, who's always been really in tune with the Lord, God spoke to her during that service and spoke to her about that I needed to go with these YWAM guys. So she ended up going and talking to them, and they told us about this program called the SST, Summer Services Training. And I went, and up until that point, I had been a total mama's boy, had never really spent the night at anybody's house. Honestly, if you had known me when I was a teenager, when I was young, everyone would have told you, if anybody was going to be a missionary, it was not me. Other than the fact that I loved missions, I didn't spend the night at my friend's house. I didn't like to go anywhere. I just wanted to stay here. As a matter of fact, this video where I'm recording this is the room that I grew up in. I mean, I'm recording this in my bedroom, my childhood bedroom, which is a pretty large room actually, because we have our cabin. My parents have a cabin right behind here, this land, and then there's this little cabin here, and this is the room that I grew up in. And so I'm still back here. We're here for a couple of months while we're waiting. I'll get into that in a minute about why we're actually here right now. But we're not actually staying in this room. I just came down here to record this because my children will for sure come and try and jump, photobomb me while I'm trying, which they still might. But anyway, so I ended up going on to the SST with YWAM Tyler, Texas. And it was terrifying because I had never been away from my family. I didn't know what to expect. It was 3 weeks long, and I was like, wow, that's a really long time. And Tyler, back then for me, it's an hour and a half from here. Back then, that was it may as well be the moon. It was so far away because I never did anything away from my family. So I ended up going, and it was super scary, but it was amazing. I mean, the people that I met there. But the big part of that was we ended up going to Mexico. And that was my very first mission trip. And it was the craziest mission trip because we went to Mexico and we crossed the border. Right after we crossed the border, the bus died. of course, I mean, YWAM buses are known for that because they usually get the old, leftovers from, a church or something like that. So the YWAM bus actually dies, and we're stuck just like 15 minutes across the border in this little border town. And so the leaders, and there we was, that YWAM Tyler, if you don't know, that's one of the biggest bases. I mean, it's a huge base. So we had like 75 kids with us, all teenagers, and then you have about a dozen leaders. So one of the leaders or two, whoever it was, they went and they tried to find a mechanic. The mechanic comes and he says, okay, I got to take the bus overnight. And the guy takes the bus to his mechanic shop. And because we're this YWAM team full of teenagers who have no money, we couldn't afford to go to a hotel. So we literally just claimed the sidewalk. And it was this storefront sidewalk. We piled all of our bags into this one giant pile, and we just laid down. And that was my first night, like, on a mission trip, was I slept on the concrete on the streets of Mexico, just like 75 young, U.S. students all just sleeping on the sidewalk. And I still have pictures I have an old photo album. I still have pictures of that pile because I was like, this is crazy, And we ended up going out into the desert. We spent, 10 days out in the desert there. There was no water. We were eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and cans of peaches. That was what we ate every single day for at least 2 meals a day. So it was quite an experience. We did the whole deal, dressing up as clowns, doing all these kinds of things. And I completely loved it, but it was so different from what I expected that at first I was like, I want to be a missionary, but I don't really want to go with YWAM because I still had the mentality of this is for me, I was thinking this is too much fun. I'm dressing up like a clown. I'm, we're doing all kinds of pranks on each other. We're goofing around. People are doing all kinds of just crazy. Well, for me, it was crazy back then. It was just the easiest trip for me. I enjoyed it so much. It was so much fun. I had all these friends. It was basically youth camp where we got to do ministry all day, which is what I always wanted to do. So I was thinking, this is way too much fun. I'm not suffering enough. So I don't really want to be with YWAM because YWAM is too fun. I want to go somewhere else where I can really suffer for the Lord, carry my cross. That was my mentality back then. I realize now God wants us to have fun. So that's okay. But I back then, I was 13. So, but I knew it really it cemented it in my mind and in my heart that I wanted to be in ministry. And there was a moment there that actually was a life-changing moment for me where that night that we spent on the concrete, I was dead broke. I mean, my parents sent me out there with a little bit of cash, but I had spent it all whenever I was at the YWAM base there on snacks and stuff, because you gotta have snacks, And so I had spent it all, and we're there in Mexico. I had nothing. And morning came. The bus wasn't there yet, and I felt this guy kicking me. I remember I'm laying on I'm sleeping on the concrete, and I was asleep. I had my backpack for a pillow, and this guy is kicking me. And I wake up, and there's this big Korean guy standing over me. He was one of the youth pastors from a youth group that had come part of the SST, because remember, it was a large group. This big Korean guy is standing over me, and he says, it's time for breakfast. And I looked up at him. Being 13 and just 13-year-olds just say whatever they're going to say, I told him, I don't have any money. And he said, don't worry about it, come with me. So I actually followed this guy, and he took me to McDonald's. I get into McDonald's, and half the group is already there. I go inside, I see half the group is there, and I'm still thinking, well, maybe he just wants me to be part of the group. I wasn't, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just thinking, okay, there's my teenagers here eating, and I'll just sit with them or something like that. The guy goes up to the counter and brings back an Egg McMuffin, just like a single wrapped Egg McMuffin, and gives it to me. And I realized everybody else had that. He had bought that Egg McMuffins for every single person on the team, 75 people, which for me as a 13-year-old, I was like, this guy has spent so much money on us. And it completely, I thought, I had never seen anybody. In my memory, I had never seen anybody who had ever been so generous to total strangers. This guy didn't know me. It was the first time we'd ever even spoken. And he wakes me up and he bought me breakfast. And nobody had ever done that for me before. And so I was so shocked by it. It completely changed. And I've never spoken to him again. Don't know where he is. I wish I did. I would love to tell him the story, but I don't even know if I would recognize him. Well, I wouldn't recognize him now. If it's been, that was 25, whatever it was, years ago. I'm not very good at math. So it was however long ago it was over 20 years ago that this happened. No, it was exactly 20 years ago. Yeah, it was 20 years ago that this happened. And so, I mean, this guy changed my life by giving me an Egg McMuffin, and I decided from that point on, I want to be like this guy. I want to be generous. I want to be able to give to other people. I want to be able to help other people. And so that's been kind of a staple in my life. And this guy doesn't know this, which goes to show you how important the little things that you do are. It may seem like nothing to you. So, okay, so I spend $100 on Egg McMuffins for a bunch of teenagers, and you're thinking they're all going to forget this, but you have no idea who you're going to impact. You have no idea on your outreach when you go into a church who's going to be affected by this. So I go on this outreach, and I don't want to, let me see, I don't want to take up too much time on this. But so I go on this outreach, and God completely just flips my life upside down. And I decide, okay, I want to be in ministry, but I really want to go with somebody else. So that was 13, went back home, went back to just continued my homeschooling stuff. And whenever I was 16 years old, I felt like the Lord released me to go into missions. And my mother and my pastor, they all were in agreement with it. And I actually, I still was thinking, okay, I don't really want to go with YWAM, but because they were the only people I knew, and I actually applied for several DTSs. I actually applied for the DTS in Tyler, Texas. I applied for DTSs all over the places that I wanted to go. All no's. No. You're too young. You're too young. You're too young. Because I was homeschooled. You know, I didn't have the degree, whatever you call it, the certificate of graduation, whatever it is you public school people get whenever you graduate public school. I didn't have that. You know, I had just gone to a college, a local community college, and I did a little test, and I got like my GED. That was all I had. And back then, whenever I was trying to apply, it didn't matter. Like, you had to be 18 to do a DTS. Nowadays, a lot of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds get into DTSs because they just take a gap year in their high school or something. A lot of people do it. But back then, it was not very common to see a 16-year-old, at least in the places that I knew. It wasn't a common thing, and nobody accepted me. I got all no's, just straight up no. And so as a result, I was thinking, well, I'm just gonna have to wait till I'm 18. Even though I felt the release, my parents did, my pastor did, we all felt like it was time, but there was nothing opening up for me until I got a phone call. And it's amazing how God will move on your behalf sometimes. I get a phone call from one of the leaders in YWAM, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I didn't even know anybody up there. They gave me a phone call. I pick up the phone. Well, my parents gave me the phone. You know, hey, this phone call for you. Pick up the phone, and they said, we heard you want to do a DTS. We'll accept you here in Minneapolis if you want to come here. I didn't know. I still to this day don't know how they learned that I wanted to do it. To this day, I don't know how it happened. But I ended up getting accepted into that DTS, and I ended up going. I went and did my DTS there in Minneapolis. It was awesome. I mean, I was a terrible, terrible student in my DTS. I was just, man, to this day, I actually saw the director of YWAM Minneapolis. It was about 2 years ago now. About 2 years ago, maybe 2.5, at a conference there in Panama City, the YWAM Americas conference. And the director of that base still remembers me. Because I used to make all these crazy, I actually still make a lot of crazy videos, actually. Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. I used to make all these really crazy videos, and because I made these crazy videos, the director there, David, he actually said, you know, he recognized me immediately, and he said, Alan, we still show those videos that you made whenever you were in the DTS, because I just made ridiculous videos all the time. So maybe maybe I'll show you guys one of these, or just tell you the link. I have a YouTube video and stuff, YouTube channel and stuff like that, where I do all kinds of crazy videos. Anyway, so now I do them with my son, which is a lot more fun because it's not just me. So I was a terrible student. I was the guy in the back. Actually, I had a hoodie. So, I was the guy who'd sit in back with the hoodie on, and I'd have headphones underneath because the teachers were just, they were awesome. Some of them were awesome. There was one guy from Mexico who was incredible. There were a couple, but some of the teachers were just, I was so arrogant back then. I was so proud that I thought, oh, I know all this stuff. And I was bored by it because I didn't think I could learn anything from them. Now I actually kind of wish I could redo my DTS so I could actually pay attention to the teachers. But back then, when you're that age, you just think you know everything anyway. And I thought it, so I didn't get much out of my DTS. I didn't pay much attention. I got called into by leaders and actually got called into the director's office one time to talk because I was just constantly, I was the student who had the secret relationship that you're not supposed to have. You get there to DTS and like the first thing to tell you is put your heart in the refrigerator for 5 months. Well, I didn't. I had a secret relationship with a girl from Ecuador, and that was that was a whole mess. We never did anything, but it was just a secret little relationship I kept getting called out on and all this. I was just constantly causing trouble, guys. It was terrible. And I can't believe I even passed graduated that DTS. I don't know why they passed me. I caused so many problems. And so I ended up going through my DTS, but there was one class in particular. That was the thing. I was arrogant. I was proud and all this kind of stuff, but my heart was still on fire for God. Maybe that's why they let me graduate. Oh, my thing just went to sleep on me. So maybe that's why they allowed me to graduate and all that stuff, because even though I was lazy and I was arrogant and all this kind of stuff, God knew my heart, and my heart was I still loved him, and I wanted more from him, and I wanted to do more for the gospel. I wanted to work for the kingdom of God. I wanted to, I'm a son of God, and as a son of God, I want to be part of the Father's business. I want to be doing the Father's business. I don't want to just live normal life. I wanted to, that was back in the days when everyone was talking about being a history maker. Some of you might be too young to remember that, but everyone was talking about being a history maker, and that song History Maker was out, and everybody was singing that song. That was me. I was like, I want to be a history maker, And so, but there was one point in those classes where I was sitting in the back, and it was the most boring class ever. To this day, I still don't like this class. All right, and this is just a boring class. I'm not going to tell you which one it was because you might be doing it there during this DTS, but man, was it boring. And so it's this grueling class, and I'm sitting there in the classroom just waiting for it to be over, and I had a vision, which I have not had many visions in my life. I can't, I'm not one of those guys who can tell you all, who's going to be the next president or anything like that. I don't have that very often, but I had a vision, and in this vision, I saw myself on the ground, and I was praying, and as I was praying, there were these waves of demons that were coming down in this place, and as I was praying, waves of angels would come and would push them back. And so I'm seeing all of this happen in my vision. I'm shocked because I didn't expect this vision, and I heard the name of a place, a biblical place, which I didn't know where this place was. After class, I went and I looked it up. It turned out it was modern day Turkey. So I ended up actually going to Turkey. I originally thought that I was going to go to Latin America. I wanted to go to Mexico. That was where I always wanted to go, was to go to Mexico, work with tribes down there. But God spoke to me and said, and he very clearly said, you're supposed to go to Turkey for 2 years. And so I finished my DTS. After my DTS, I ended up going to Scotland and to do a School of Frontier Missions, which I was a terrible student in that school as well. I was just as arrogant. It was just a few months later. I graduated my DTS, had an amazing outreach, guys. I'm just going to tell you right now, on your DTS outreach, take advantage of it because it is an incredible experience. It may be hard. You may not agree with everything that happens. You may be tired. But I'll tell you what, you will get out of your outreach what you put into it. And my outreach was incredible. I didn't go anywhere special. Like half of our group, where did they go? They went to Tanzania. And I ended up not having enough money to go to Africa. That's where I wanted. I tried to do everything you're supposed to do. I wrote all the newsletters, did everything you're supposed to do to be able to go, and I didn't get it. And I ended up going to the east coast of the U.S., which I am so happy I went to because my DTS started September 21st, 2001. So right after the towers had been attacked in New York. We ended up going to New York for about 3 weeks of my outreach, and where the towers, the trade towers had crumbled, they'd been destroyed, there was it was miraculous because all these buildings around it were damaged and destroyed whenever the buildings crashed, whenever they crumbled, except this one little historic church, which was right next to the buildings, wasn't affected. It was miraculous. There were some, I can't remember who, but there was a really famous president who had gone, I think maybe it was like Abraham Lincoln, I think, who had prayed in that place, and it was like this, it had like a memorial to him in there, all this kind of stuff. And it was this incredible place that God had just sort of miraculously protected. The firefighters had set up their base of operations in that church, and somehow, I don't know how he did it, but our leader of our DTS outreach ended up getting us into that church with the firefighters. I mean, you could look out the window and look into the crater where the buildings were and all the rubble. You could watch the firefighters work. And he somehow got us into that church. We weren't allowed to take any cameras in. We weren't allowed to take any pictures or anything like that. But he got us in there. And during our time in New York, we would work. Talk about tiring. We would work all night long. We would cook for the firefighters. We would make their beds. We would clean up the church for them because that's where they were based out of. And it was such an intense atmosphere, obviously, because they're out there looking for bodies. They're looking for all the, just any kind of remains, all this kind of stuff. And I remember I sat down one of our last days there. I sat down with one of the firefighters, and he was just sitting there. He was tired. He was resting. And I said, "Hey, man, how you doing today?" And he said, today's been a good day." And I said, why has it been a good day? What happened? And he said, "I found a woman's finger today." I said, why is that good? He said, "Because that means there's one more person that we can identify." And that was my outreach. I mean, I was 16 years old, and I'm seeing I'm experiencing these kind of things. And he actually took out a piece of one of the windows, and he gave it to me. And he said, "Technically, this is illegal because this is technically evidence. But I want you to take this because I want you to remember what happened here." And I still have that glass. That piece of the window is thick. I mean, it was about, I'd say half an inch, maybe an inch thick glass. And that my outreach, that wasn't the only place. I mean, it was almost a 3-month outreach, so that was just a small portion of it. But we went all along the East Coast, and I had never traveled before, so it was all just incredible for me to see all those things. And it was exhausting, driving hours and hours and hours. Of course, now that's what I do all the time. But back then, it was just an absolutely incredible experience. So I did that, and then I went to Scotland, did my School of Frontier Missions, like I said, and I was a terrible student. They actually changed the rules in the base because of me. Back then on that base in Scotland, you were allowed to watch, if you were in a secondary school, you were allowed to watch movies. I watched so many movies that they changed the rules to where now secondary students can't watch movies anymore. Because I was always like, "Hey guys, let's watch it." Like every night, I was like, "Everybody, let's watch a movie. Let's watch Braveheart," whatever. So I was always putting up these movies. They ended up changing the rules. And there was a guy, whenever I made it to Turkey, there was a guy who came and he was like, "You're the one who made me not allowed to watch movies." It's pretty funny. I still laugh about it because I'm not there anymore. I'm not a student anymore. So, anyway, it was very, very funny for me. So I did my School of Frontier Missions there, all with the purpose of going to Turkey, and I was really excited about it. Everybody was like, "Why are you going to Turkey? You're crazy." Ended up going. They wouldn't let me go until I turned 18, so I had to come back to Texas, and I waited, and 2 days after my 18th birthday, I flew out to Turkey. And I was there for 2 years, didn't leave. And actually, a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about during this class come out of my time in Turkey, because those 2 years in Turkey that I was just there for straight 2 years, those 2 years in Turkey were the foundation of who I am now. They really created that foundation. So I go to Turkey, there for 2 years, and I'm not going to go into Turkey right now because I don't want to I'll talk about it throughout the class here and some other things that have happened as well, other places. Now, I mean, I was there for 2 years, but I've been in ministry for almost 20 now, so that was obviously a very small portion of it, but it was a foundational portion for who I am now and the things that I do and all that. So I was in Turkey for those 2 years, incredible, and then the Lord, after 2 years, spoke to me about going to Latin America. I thought I was going to go to Mexico, and I met a missionary. Most people have not heard of him, but maybe you have. His name is David Hogan. I met this missionary named David Hogan in Denmark at a conference, which is a whole miraculous thing on its own, which I won't tell that whole story. Ended up meeting David Hogan, and I understood that he was inviting me to Mexico. He understood a different thing. And so as soon as I met him and I thought that he was inviting me to Mexico, I told my whole team, I said, "All right, guys, I'm leaving. Once my 2 years is up, I'm going to Mexico." And ended up, I left. 2 years ended. I left. I was 20 years old. went back to Texas, determined to go to Mexico and work with David Hogan. I mean, he'd planted thousands of churches down there. He's had, now his ministry has had like over, it's like over 500 people have been raised from the dead in his ministry now. Just incredible ministry. The guy is awesome. I still think he's awesome. I was just with him over in California just a few months ago, and might be with him again in December at another conference. And so, awesome guy. Back then I was just too young. I was too naive and all. I jumped to conclusions. I still jump to conclusions a lot of times. So I go to Texas and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work with David Hogan. And I sent, back in those days, he only used faxes. So there was email. There had been email for a while, but he still just used fax. So I faxed him every single day. I was sending him faxes and didn't ever get a response. And it was so immature the way that I did it. But he never responded, which he shouldn't. I would not respond to me either if I was getting those kind of faxes. So he never responded. And I waited for like 6 months. And finally, after about 6 months, my parents, because I was living at home with my parents again, my parents said, Alan, you're a missionary. You need to either go out on the mission field or you need to get a job. And there was a girl that I had liked who was visiting me here in Texas. And we were talking, and I told her, I said, all right, this girl had been with me in Turkey for 2 years. Or over a year, actually. She joined later. But we were really good friends, and I liked her. She never liked me back, so nothing ever happened. But, she was visiting me because we were really good friends. So I was asking her, like, I just told her, I said, all right, name a country in Central America. That's where I'm going to go. And she said Panama, because she had a friend who was on staff in Panama City. So that afternoon, I came back to the house. I filled out an application for YWAM Panama City with Richard and Debbie Tracy, for those of you who know them. And Debbie Tracy called me back within like a couple hours, like on the phone. She called me, which I had been trying to get a hold of Hogan and all this and no response. Then to just get an instant response from Debbie, she, called me right back and said, yeah, come on down. I'm obviously just boiling it down a little bit, but basically the whole process was, yeah, come down. And because I had experience, because I had done the School of Frontier Missions and I had 2 years in Turkey, they told me they were starting a new base in Chiriquí in the Volcan area and asked to work among the Nobe tribe, because I said I wanted to work among tribal people. And they said, we're starting this new base in Chiriquí among the Nobe. You could come be a part of that pioneer team. I ended up flying down within like a week. I flew down to Panama City, jumped on that team. We were 4 people. It was myself and 3 others. And we went up to Volcan and started that base. And it was a pioneer team, so it's very different being on a pioneer team than being part of, like, just coming onto a base that's already running with schools and everything. When you're part of a pioneer team, like, you don't know what to do. You just show up at a place and you're like, all right, what do we do today, guys? Because you have you have nothing. You have no doors. You don't know anybody. There's nothing established. You have to establish everything. And establishing things is a lot harder than you think it is. You can't just go out into the village and just start ministry and it just all works, because people don't trust you. And we lost the whole ministry. We lost like 2 or 3 years of ministry in one place because we had established some really awesome things. We started bringing in short-term teams. Short-term teams were giving out money and giving out clothes and giving out food and all this kind of stuff, which you think is what you should do, except that what ended up happening in that village especially, and it happens a lot, in a lot of other places, is the tribal group, the village that you're in, they get so used to people coming in and giving them all of this money and all this stuff that when you bring in a team that just wants to do puppets or children's ministry, they get really upset and they don't want the team to come. And they actually end up turning the village into more of a tourist location rather than a ministry location. So we lost the pastor that we were working with, got so like that, where all he wanted was money. He only wanted teams that were bringing money. He lived across the street from me in Volcan. He lived up in the mountains, but he had spent about a month in Volcan and a month up in the mountains. He would come up almost every single day that he was in Volcan, knock on my door. When are teams coming? I need some money. I need money. Every single day. Because then there were a couple teams that were actually supporting him monthly, and they were sending the support through me. And it was constantly like, hey, when's more support coming? Because he would get money, which would be a lot for him as a Nobe, as a tribal guy, and he would spend it all. And so then, because he didn't know how to manage the money. So that was an error on our part because, we had spent all this time in this doing this ministry and we didn't handle it right. We didn't know what we were doing. So we ended up losing that whole ministry. And things have gotten better. There was a whole restoration process that happened, which was awesome. But we ended up losing several years worth of ministry and caused all kinds of problems because we didn't handle the introduction into the ministry correctly, setting up that foundation, which is so important in this kind of ministry. So I went there. I was part of that pioneer team, and so now I'm gonna wrap this up real quick here with talking about my family here. So you can see my wife, my two boys. I met my wife in Volcan. She was not a YWAMer. She was not a missionary. Her parents had hosted missionaries pretty much her whole life, and her aunt was a missionary in Africa. She wanted to be a missionary. And when we came, her father actually owned several houses. When we got there, we ended up renting one of her father's houses. And that became the very first YWAM base. And what happened was we rented that house, but the rest of the team, the other 3 people on the team, they went back to Panama City because they had to do some other things there. And I ended up being the person that was voted to, I voted myself, and they agreed to it, because nobody else wanted to do it, to stay by myself in that house in Volcan. I didn't speak a word of Spanish. I had spent 2 years going to Turkish school, which I still go to Turkey, whenever I go to Turkey, which I'm very glad I have that foundation Turkish now because I can get around. But I didn't speak any Spanish at all. No Spanish. And so I'm sitting there the first day after the team left. And I don't want to spend too much time on the story. Basically, that girl that I mentioned that I had a crush on, who was visiting me and told me about Panama, I still thought that I was convinced I was going to marry that girl. Whenever I came to Panama and the team left, excuse me, when the team left, I woke up the very first morning. I woke up, everyone's gone, and the presence of God was in my room, like in intensity that I have only felt a few times in my life. And God spoke to me, and he said 3 things. And the first thing he said was, the girl that you like, you need to let her go. You need to break things off with her right now. The second thing he said was, I actually saw a vision. I saw my wife in the picture there, and God said, this is the girl you're going to marry. And then the next thing was, I saw an angel, and he said, preach the gospel, preach the gospel, preach the gospel. Those what he said 3 times. And that was it. So I immediately got up. I was, brand new, broke missionary. I didn't have a computer, didn't have a phone, didn't have anything. So I went to an internet cafe, wrote that. It was really funny because I wrote that girl. Because, when emotionally you like somebody, you don't see clearly, right? And so I was convinced I was going to marry this other girl, and I was she didn't really like me back, but she thought maybe there could be something, and so she just needed time to pray about it. She'd been praying about it for like a year and had never given me an answer, so I was still waiting, waiting for something. So I ended up writing her. And I was, back then especially, I was not very good with words. I was in the sense of, I was just too blunt. People got mad at me because I would say things too bluntly all the time. And so I write her and I said, God just spoke to me. Nothing's ever going to happen between us. I'm breaking this off right now. Me thinking that there was something going on between us, And she writes me back and she said, well, that's good because I have a boyfriend and we've been dating for a long time now. And she ended up marrying him, and they have all these kids now, which is great, because I met my wife, and we have an awesome, awesome marriage. And so, but I look back now, I was like, man, I was so dumb, the things that we do by emotion, when we don't think straight, we don't think clearly because of emotions. It's just like, you can live in this just other delusional world like I was. And so that all happened, and I'm not feeling too great because she told me that, and I'm thinking, wow, I was really dumb. So I'm not thinking about another girl. I'm just thinking, wow, my heart hurts. I'm not thinking about, even though I had that whole experience, my emotions were still, that's the thing about moving with God. When you're operating with God, too many times people depend on their emotions and they're guided by their emotions. With God, God can be moving in incredible ways, and you can not see, not feel, not hear, not taste, not touch anything. Not see, you in the physical can see nothing happening, and yet God can be moving whole mountains for you, and you don't even realize it because you don't feel it. You feel discouraged, you feel sad, you feel like things aren't working out very well, and yet God is in the background just changing your whole life for the better, and you don't realize it. So I was not feeling very good. I was not thinking about some other girl. So I go back to my little house, and I'm just sort of sitting there on the couch because nobody's there. I don't speak Spanish, and I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't have any money to go anywhere else, and I can't do any ministry because I don't know anybody. All of a sudden, I hear a knock on the door. I go over, open up the door, and there's this little Latino guy there. This Panamanian guy is standing there, and he kind of motions for me if I want to come over and eat. So I understood that, and I thought, yeah, I want to eat. I'm hungry. So I go over. I follow this guy over. It turns out it's my landlord, which is now my father-in-law. My landlord's son. He brings me over to the house. I walk into the house, and sitting in a rocking chair in the living room is the girl I had just seen in the vision, which is my wife now. I saw her, but because I saw her, but I really didn't believe it because my heart was not feeling good, because I was sad. And I was like, no, I must have seen her on the street or something like that, or when the team was here, and I just imagined it. So I actually did not pursue anything with her, and I didn't want a relationship, and she didn't either. She had just broken off with another guy as well, and we just became friends. Her and her family taught me Spanish for about 6 months. Whenever I knew enough Spanish that I could actually, I started to kind of have feelings for her, but I was like, there's just no way. She's not a missionary. She's never done a DTS. She's not a YWAM or none of that. But I just felt like, I started to like her. And so I got to the point, my leaders, they agreed with the relationship, with me trying to pursue a relationship with. I had never spoken to her about a relationship at all. We had never had a date. We had never spoken about anything. And I'm there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to her and see if she wants to have a relationship. And right then, you guys are not going to believe this, right then I get a phone call from David Hogan's son, the missionary in Mexico. His son calls me on the phone and says, hey, we got your messages. You're accepted to come up, since we're in Panama, come up to Mexico. You can come up to Mexico and work with us. And I'm like, what? It's been almost a year since I sent those messages, and I'm just now, it's just crazy, guys. So all of a sudden I'm in this predicament. I've got this girl that I now really like, and I went through all the red tape, all the hoops that you have to go through to have a relationship in most ministries. And so I'm about to go talk to this girl, and then I've got this dream that I've wanted to go to Mexico for all these years, and with David Hogan, who's like a hero of the faith of mine. And so I'm sitting there like, what do I do now? So I just sort of put out a fleece to God, and I said, all right, I'm not going to wait for a girl like the last girl. I'm not going to wait for someone who's just going to sort of string me along. It's a yes or it's a no. So that night we were supposed to go to church. I'm walking to church with Carmi, my wife. I'm walking to church with her, and I told her, and this is the first thing I ever said in relationship ever. I said, so you heard that I got a call from Mexico. I told her about it earlier. Heard that I got a call from Mexico. They invited me to go up there. But if I were to stay here, would you want to get married? That was the first relationship question I ever asked her. And she looked over at me and she said, yeah. And that was it. That was it. There was no romantic, nothing. We went to church. And then came back and I actually got my toe squished in church because I wore sandals all the time. And I had sandals, and I'm sitting next to her, and we're basically engaged, I guess. And I'm sitting next to her in church, and this guy sat on the bench, and the bench was wobbly. Guy sat down on the bench, and it's just squished my toe, and it was a bummer. So anyway, we go to church, go back to her house, tell her parents. Her parents are like, hey, that's great. And we started planning the wedding, and a few months later, we got married. And now we're coming up on 13. In April, it will be 13 years that we've been married. We have our 2 boys. Elias is 11 now. So in that picture there, he's probably 10, maybe 9. But he's 11 now. My other boy, he's 4. He's going to be 5 in just next month. No, December. I don't know what month we're in. December, he is going to be, actually, no. I don't know what month we're in. Anyway, December, he's going to be 5. And we have an awesome marriage. Our marriage has been really awesome. So that's a little bit of who I am. I was in YWAM Panama for years and years. Like we have been kind of migrant. We come and go. So we were in Costa Rica for a couple of years after we got married. We were part of YWAM Chiriquí for a long time, and I was the deputy director in YWAM Chiriquí, and led lots of short-term teams. Taught this school, this class a lot. I've led a bunch of DTSs. Led one or two school of leadership. What is it? I can't remember. Right, guys, I'm blanking on this. School of Ministry and Leadership Development, SLMD. Yes, that's the one. I've led that one a couple of times. And finally, what time are we at, guys? I think we're going to take a break here, and we'll take a break in just a little bit here. So just to kind of sum this up, or kind of finish up my story, I was in YWAM for all this time. We were in Argentina. We've been basically in Latin America. But I started feeling a little bit of a stirring from the Holy Spirit in me, because I had started out in ministry with this plan to go to unreached people groups. And I wanted to be I had spent 2 years in Turkey, absolutely loved Turkey. Turkey is one of the most awesome places you can do ministry. I mean, the people are awesome, the food is awesome, the ministry, the YWAMers there, the missionaries are incredible. And I'm still very well connected to a lot of them there. And so, but I hadn't left Central America other than Argentina, which I was there for 6 months, and that was whenever my wife was doing her school, the Frontier Mission. So I was just staff on that school, and then we left. Other than that, I had not left Central America. I mean, I'd been Costa Rica, Panama, all over. We've been pretty much everywhere in Central America now. And so we were at this point. I started feeling like, man, I mean, I felt like I was supposed to go unreached people groups, and the Nobe, yes, they're unreached, but the Nobe are also, they've got lots of missionaries going to them. And so in 2016, I set up some trips to go to, where did I go? I went to Colombia, I went to Thailand, and I went to Turkey again. And it was my first time going back to Turkey, because I hadn't left Central America. It was my first time going back since I had been there. And I set up these trips, and in Colombia, we were working with an unreached tribe called the Wiwa, which I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes before we go on break. I went to all these different places, and God just completely just changed my mind again. It was just like doing the SST, where my whole world was flipped upside down. I just got set on fire for doing this kind of ministry again and being out in these places. I mean, working with the Wiwa. There's no other missionaries working with the Wiwa. We're the only ones. And in Thailand, we work with a ministry there called Beautiful Feet, where these people, they're ex-cons, under 18, ex-cons, and this ministry just takes them in. And some of them are serial killers. I mean, but they're so saved. I had coffee with a guy who he seemed like the most Christian person you ever meet until he told me he had killed 6 people. And he had gotten saved, just radically saved by this ministry, off of drugs, and was on fire for Jesus, and had learned to be a barista, because that ministry teaches them to make coffee. And so I just got completely set on fire for this, and it kind of started kind of a cascade effect, where I had started a ministry called Found back in 2013, and that was really just something for myself and some guys here in Texas who are not YWAMers to kind of do ministry together. We started out buying Bibles for pastors in China through the Voice of the Martyrs, and just doing little projects like that. I did a couple of these kind of mission seminars or webinars. Actually, no, it wasn't webinars. It was just seminars here in the States every now and then when I was here. It was a very small thing, but it kept growing and growing and growing, to the point where at the end of 2016, it was taking my attention too much out of YWAM. So it was a little bit of a weird situation, where I love YWAM, still do, love YWAM, have a great relationship, but I had this ministry that was kind of my baby that had grown, and for it to continue growing, it needed more of my attention. So we ended up coming to this decision. I had lots of counsel from pastors and leaders, and I want to make sure, now that I'm older, I want to make sure I do things with counsel and do things because other people who have more experience than me can give me a lot better wisdom and from a lot better perspective. Because now that I've been, some of the story I've told you, I understand how affected, how blinded we can be about our emotions. So it's really good to have outside perspective, because you can be in a situation that you are sure that you're right on, but because you're blinded by your emotions, you're completely wrong and you're destroying yourself. And so I had done that. I had hurt myself plenty of times, and many other stories I haven't told, and I probably won't get to during this class. But I got lots of perspective, and it was unanimous from my pastors and my leaders that I had here in the States and other bases. Everyone was like, yes, go for it. God is growing your ministry, found ministry, so go for it. So I ended up phasing out of YWAM in late 2016, stepped down from being like a full-time staff position in YWAM. And in the beginning of 2017, we moved full-time into Found Ministries, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And it has been just a whirlwind. It has been crazy. I mean, we were in 2017, I flew completely around the world, over 40 flights. I was gone from home almost 6 months. We went, completely around the world. We went to Nepal, we went to Thailand, we went to Turkey, we went all over Central America. We went to Colombia several times to work with our tribal group that we work with there, the Bible translation project that we have going on. We have all these different ministries that we're doing completely around the world. And then at the end of 2017, we started working on my wife's green card, because we realized if we're going to travel this much, my wife needs to be able to travel with me. And since she's Panamanian, she can't go to a lot of the countries that I can go to, at least not nearly as easily. For her to go to Thailand, we have to go to Mexico, be there for weeks, apply at the Thai embassy, and then be able to go. And so we decided for the long term, we need my wife's U.S. citizenship, which is like a 4-year process. So we came here early 2017 to start that process. We have to be here until we get the green card. And it's been since December, and we're at the end of the year, and we're still waiting for it. And so we have been doing speaking tours this whole year. That's why I'm not able to be there with you guys in Bocas as much as I want to be, because we are not allowed to leave the country until my wife gets her green card given to her. And they're telling us now it might not be till March. So we've been doing speaking tours. We've driven coast to coast about 4 times now. We went to California. We're in Texas. We went to California, then North Carolina. Then on another trip, we went up to we've gone actually 2 or 3 times up to Wisconsin and back. Several times, so we've been to North Carolina about 3 times. Just speaking in churches. We usually do a circuit, like, California, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and so New York. We've been to New York a few times. Just speaking in churches, speaking in conferences. I actually, most of the time, it's funny because the Lord spoke to me very clearly that when we're in the States, we're ministering in the States. So I actually don't speak on missions. I don't do fundraising. I don't speak on missions whenever I'm here and whenever I'm preaching here in the States. I actually usually teach on the presence of God and walking in the power of God, because we've had lots of really wild miracles that have happened, which I'll tell you guys about now that our foundational session is kind of coming to a close here. I'll tell you more of these miracles that have happened. And so I actually teach. I have a school that we do called the School of the Presence, and I just did my first webinar called Mountain Crushing Faith, which is all about walking in faith and learning to move mountains, because anything is possible in faith. But our ministry is primarily a missions ministry. We do short-term mission trips. We do a lot of unreached people groups. We are actually in 8 countries now, which is phenomenal. Thank you, Lord, for being a ministry that has really only been full-time for 2 years to be in 8 nations now. And we have 4 short-term teams coming with us to Panama next year. And I've got pastors that go with me on other trips around the world. And God has just been so good to us. He's been so awesome. So that's a little bit about myself. I want to see what time we have here. We have a few minutes. So now that you guys have a really good idea of who I am, I always like to take this first session and really just share about myself, because I feel like if you don't know who your teacher is, it's a lot harder to really connect with what he's saying or she is saying. Myself, I've had teachers who come in and just go straight into the teaching, and I feel like I don't know them, so it's hard for me to connect with them. So you're going to learn very quickly from me. I am a teacher. I'm much more of I'm not really a teacher. I'm more of a storyteller. So I will teach a lot. There will definitely be a lot of teaching. There will be a lot of stats and stuff like that. But there's a lot more. I tell a lot more stories because I feel like I learn a lot. And I feel like for you guys, especially who are starting out in ministry, maybe some of you aren't. Maybe some of you have been in ministry and you're just now coming into YWAM. But for you to see my background and see where I've come from, and to be able to learn that you can, most people, statistically speaking, most missionaries quit by 2 years, probably 9 out of 10. And we're actually going to go into all of that as the reasons why, because this will help you as you go on outreach and as if you're going to continue in ministry. Even if you're not, even there's a lot of things in here that will help you out with that. But for someone, for myself, who's been in ministry almost 20 years now, and am still in full-time ministry and still love it, and I will do this until I die. I can't ever imagine being at a point where I wouldn't want to be in full-time ministry, because it is the best job that you can have in the world, to be in full-time ministry and to just serve Jesus. To be able to do this, I mean, you're in Bocas right now, and I mean, you know how many people work their entire lives to be able to save up for retirement, to be able to do what we have been doing from our youth all the way. I mean, it's wonderful that God allows us to do this. All right, so let me look at this here. Maybe we'll take a break a little bit early. We have a few. I wanted to show you this video real quick. I'm going to skip ahead by one video. So I just want to show you this video. Frontier missions. The reason that we talk about frontier missions, I'm just looking at my notes here, guys, so don't be like, what's he looking at? So you know, frontier missions is the least funded. It has the least amount of missions. Now, I wanted to define frontier missions real quick, and then we'll take our break. I'm going to show you this video and we'll take our break. Frontier missions is the missions part where missionaries go to people groups that have 2% or less that are reached. 2% of the population or less have been reached by the gospel. Okay, so that's what our mission focuses on, and that is what we're going to be talking about. Specifically, people groups that are less than 2%, that have less than 2% population been reached by the gospel. This aspect of missions is the least funded. It has the least amount of missionaries. It is the most difficult area of missions, and you will see very clearly why. By the end of these days that you're in class with me, you're going to see very clearly why this is the way it is, why it is there's so few people. It's not just because people don't want to go. It's not just because people don't like this kind of missions. It's none of that. It is simply just logistics, and we'll talk about that. But let me show you this video. This is a promo video that I made a while back, just to kind of give you a little bit of taste for. So I'm gonna go full screen with this. And I'm hopefully make sure that you guys can hear everything. So enjoy.
Jesus, what now? Where do I go?
Just go.
Yeah, so that was a video that we made. It was a promo video for the School of Frontier Missions back whenever we were doing that in Chiriquí. So, okay, well, I think we are going to take a break here, and I hope you guys have you feel like you've gotten a little bit of a foundation here and that you're prepared. We're going to jump right into this next session. Of course, take your break. This is a video, so you guys can take as long as a break as your leaders tell you can take. So enjoy your break, and when we get back into this, we're going to start defining what is frontier missions, what does it mean to be a missionary truly, who you are in Christ as a missionary. Because if you don't know who you are as a missionary, if you don't know who you are as a child of God, you can't really ever be fully successful, and you won't have the longevity that you need in ministry and just in your walk with Christ, because there are certain things that will allow you to maintain longevity and be able to stay strong in your race to the finish line. So we're going to talk about all of that. So thank you so much for paying attention, and hopefully none of you fell asleep. I am watching. Well, your leaders are, and I am virtually. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you guys afterwards.